Okay, hello everybody. Special Ed 620, as you know, we are entering like the final stretch. And it is really hard to believe how close to the end of the semester we are. It's like, oh my goodness, like what happened? So we have only a few more classes. Next week, we're going to focus on science. And then you'll have some readings in science. This Sunday, your math quiz is due. Okay, so we have science. The topic that we were going to review on April 12th, we may be able to do a little bit of that tonight. So that might leave room for some other things. And then after that, it's simply you are going to do your research-based practice presentations. So tonight we are going to focus a lot on your paper, even though we haven't done science yet. I think time is of the essence that we need to focus on your paper and some of those things, and then we'll do science next week. So with that, reputable sources of information. This is a research-based practice paper. Let me get you guys bigger. Therefore, we need to focus and learn about reputable sources of information. I'm hoping that some of this is a little bit of a review. I'm hoping that, there have been other classes. I mean, this is your last semester, so that you do have some idea. But one of the things we are also going to do is a little bit of a work session tonight too, so that people are actually not just learning about reputable sources of information, but you're going and finding them for your paper. If some of you have already gotten started, yay, you're ahead of the game. If you haven't, tonight will get you going. Okay? So, reputable sources of information. So in the first part of your paper, it will ask you why, or you will put in your paper, like the prompts for what you start out with the importance of using research-based practices. Why do we need to use research-based practices? Number one, it's mandated by law. Okay? Both in ESSA, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, and IDEA say that we need to use research-based practices. There's a little bit different language in a couple of them. One says scientifically based research, another one says evidence-based practices, and then there's another one, but essentially research-based practices. And I'm going to show you ESSA even has like these tiers of evidence. So, but what we need to do is focus on the science of teaching and learning. One of the reasons we need to use research-based practices is because we need to close that achievement gap. Our students who have an IEP, who are identified as needing special education services, there's a gap where they wouldn't be identified. The only way to close that gap is to use research-based practices. We cannot, it's not ethical to just try any old thing. So you would think about the same thing is if you were a doctor or a nurse and someone came to you and they were in poor health. So there was a gap between where their health is and where their health should be. You would not just send them home with a sugar pill. You would not try something that has not been proven before, correct? I mean, I would just be horrified if doctors did that, if nurses, if dental hygienists did that, other professions as well. If you know, if there are things out there that have research to support them, and you are not using those, that's not ethical. So, which is the last one there. We also want to use research-based practices for accountability and also our professionalism and ethical practice. Okay, so this is the definition of evidence-based in the Every Student Succeeds Act. So they say there is strong evidence behind a practice if there's at least one well-designed and well-implemented experimental study. They say it's moderate if there's one well-designed, well-implemented quasi-experimental, and then promising if a correlational study. You do not have to identify that for your paper. It's just how ESSA is defining these. And I'm going to tell you quickly, you won't be tested on this, but here's the difference. An experimental study has comparison groups, and those groups there was randomly assigned. A quasi-experimental may be, I always think of it as sometimes a pre-existing condition or a pre-existing group. So a quasi-experimental study may be that they compared this group of kids to this group of kids, but we know there was a difference to start with. So for example, quasi-experimental could be comparing non-LD with LD. Okay, so we know there's some differences. We did not randomly assign, we did not, it's not like this tightly controlled, but there was still a well-implemented intervention and good measures to see if it worked. The only difference here is randomized versus like this quasi-experimental, and sometimes they would match. So like LD kids in this class to this class, but the classes were evenly matched on pretty much everything except for maybe the LD. So like same socioeconomic, because if the groups are way, way, way different, you're comparing apples and oranges. But there's a lot of studies out there to see if, let's say, collaborative strategic reading, does it work as well with students with disabilities as students without? So that's those kind of studies. Those are absolutely fine to use in your paper, okay? What we want are reputable sources. This one is kind of like the lowest base, but this is one that you have selected a strategy that should be effective because it has components that are effective, but this particular strategy hasn't been used before. So for example, let's say you were going to do a vocabulary intervention and somebody has come up with this specific way to do vocabulary. And you look at it and it's got a lot of the elements of word study. It even kind of looks like the Freyer model a little bit. So this particular intervention doesn't have all the research behind it, but it does have, it's based on other research. Okay, so I just wanted to show you that you do not have to identify whether your studies fit in one of these categories, but they should at least have research behind it. You need to find research studies, at least 3 research studies. And what that means is they need to report results. So there are a lot of articles, there's a lot of internet articles out there that say CRA is wonderful. You know, CRA, you should be using it. And it may even go through and describe all the steps of CRA. It may do all that. But for your paper, you need to find at least 3 studies that report results of implementing CRA and how did that impact student achievement. Okay. So how do they determine whether something is an evidence-based practice, a research-based practice? And in fact, wait a minute. Let me go ahead and look at this one first and then go backwards. Evidence-based practices are considered higher than research-based. Evidence-based, there has been intervention that demonstrates cause and effect. So that was a nice, tightly controlled study. There are more than one study, real high quality research, and the magnitude of the effect means it had a strong effect on student learning. So this is kind of like the gold standard. Research-based practices, let's say they're silver. So they may not have as many studies. So maybe they haven't been replicated quite as many times. Maybe the studies were missing a little bit, like maybe they were missing the randomization, some of that, but they have been studied and there is research to support their use. So it's just a difference between gold and silver. So I want you to learn about these gold and silver practices. And then when they use the term scientifically based research, that's one of the terms that has been used in law. And what it basically means is methods that have research to support. So scientifically based research could be either of these two. So this is the umbrella term, and here's gold, here's silver, but they're good, okay? Now, how do they determine? Have you heard of meta-analysis studies before? Have you ever heard of that one? Okay, good, Rochelle. Basically, they're studies of studies. So it's a study that would take, if you find one of these for your paper, you're going to be in really good shape, but it's basically a study of studies. That's where the meta is. So you've heard of metacognition, which is thinking about your thinking. Meta-analysis is analysis of analysis. So this is combining many studies to see like a cumulative effect. So over the course of several studies, was there an effect? So they combine the results from different studies to determine whether there's like this larger body of research. Like, for example, any of us could find a study that says almost anything. But to be a good consumer of research, is there more than one study? Think about like all those commercials you see on there, and it's like, this study found that 9 out of 10 dentists recommend, you know, this particular thing. Well, that was one study. It was probably conducted by, you know, let's say they're saying that you need to use Crest. You know, it was probably conducted by Crest, you know. Are there multiple studies? Is there more than one? Was this the only one? So you want to determine if there's enough evidence to support a specific strategy. So all of this is part of a systematic review of practice. Okay. There are, now this PowerPoint is in La Lima. The Council for Exceptional Children has come up with this thing, high leverage practice. Oh my goodness, terminology. How is that different from an evidence-based practice? Here is an intro video to high leverage practices, and here are some implementation videos. These are more like common just practices, where these evidence-based practices are more like a whole program. This is more like collaborative strategic reading, PALS. HLPs might be more like components of effective instruction, components of effective collaboration. So you should be doing your paper more on these larger, not just on like collaboration. One of the effective elements of collaboration is, listening and not judging first. You're not going to do your paper on that. Is this all making sense? Yeah, okay, good. Now, here's one of the reasons we also need to use evidence-based or research-based practices. Again, this can go right in your rationale, okay? You have the materials right here to write that first part of your paper. Between this, and then there was that other PowerPoint about the paper that mentioned that too, and this, you have the rationale for your paper. You're demonstrating that you learned this. So sometimes we have this research to practice gap. You have people doing research and you have teachers, and often those two are not meeting in the middle very well. Teachers a lot of times don't have access to research articles. Like, for example, when you graduate and you don't have your UH login, you're going to have a harder time accessing research articles. You're still going to be able to access Teachers Pay Teachers, which is not research-based, but you're going to have a harder time. Now, if your school subscribes to some of these things, fantastic. But you may have to contact your colleagues at the university to help you look up something, okay? So teachers in practice at the school, like your teacher colleagues at the school who are not enrolled in a program, you're going to rely on the most accessible resources. And studies have shown that teachers rely, when they talk about the most accessible resources for identifying what methods to use, they rely on their colleagues. What do you use? They share resources, as you should. And the internet. You go to the internet, as well you should.
So Google Scholar is good.
Yes, it is. It is. And when you're no longer a student, you won't have free access to all the articles. Google Scholar is fantastic because it is a research tool. I love Google Scholar. It's fantastic, and you can find research studies on there. So the Google Scholar, not through the university, you can still get some things, but not everything. So sometimes when we rely on other school staff and the internet, it may lead to implementation of practices that are not evidence-based. Teachers do perceive research as important, but accessing that research is the gap. It's not that teachers don't believe in research. It's not that teachers say, oh, research is junk. It's It's all comes down to access. So they have also found that practitioners with greater knowledge of research evidence may be more likely to describe methods and procedures for addressing an individual kid's needs. So how do we know if something's reliable? These are other things. You can get articles on the internet, but you need to know what to look for. Okay? If they are affiliated with a research center, a university, a professional organization, you're probably going to be fine. If they have these .gov, .org, .edu, .com, those are probably more reputable. If they have been peer reviewed, so it's like a journal, not just a newsletter, it's going to be more reputable. Here is the caution of web-based resources. You could look up right now and find a study about how you need, about using colored lenses for reading. For some reason, this one does not die. I mean, this was around years ago where they recommended, remember back in the old days when there was transparencies that you put on an overhead projector? Maybe when you were in middle school or something, the teachers used those. Do any of you remember even seeing what a transparency is? So they recommended that using colored transparencies over reading would help dyslexia. Also, colored lenses, different colors in a room. That keyword method for solving word problems, if you use the keywords alone, that does not have research behind it. You need to have more than just the keywords, because when kids get older, some of those words can change. Facilitated communication. Have any of you heard of this one? Facilitated communication it's another one that has reiterated, and you will find information out there that says that facilitated communication is wonderful. This is mostly used individuals with autism and nonverbal. So facilitated communication, maybe you have seen the alphabet boards and the kid points to the letters and it's spelling something. Or a computer, but the facilitator is holding the student's arm and they're typing. Other words for this is the rapid prompting method. It was kind of like the next iteration. And there's one out there right now called Spelling to Communicate. They're doing STC. Here's the problem. When they have done studies, that what happens is the interventionist intentionally or unintentionally is influencing the answer. So you have the student's arm like this pointing to the letters. They have found that if the interventionist is not seeing what the student sees, they are not getting the right answers. So like if the interventionist, so if it says something about answer a question about this, and the interventionist cannot see that, the answers aren't happening and they aren't correct. So I know there's a lot of well-meaning professionals out there, and there's a lot of very well-meaning professionals that want to help nonverbal individuals communicate. But there's research that shows that this is not effective. Now, there may be a couple of people out there who really are typing. And so if you can see them typing on their own without the facilitator, then that's fine. It's just, is the facilitator doing this? So that spelling to type is the same thing now, where they have like a letter and they're pointing. So what happens is the facilitator is moving the board. Kind of like, any of you ever played Ouija board? So when you play Ouija board, you swear that you did not move that towards the answer you wanted. But did you? Did you really? Right? Brain gym. Anybody doing brain gym in their school right now? Oh, thank heavens. That was huge for a while. And they talked about crossing the midline. So kids had to do certain exercises, and it was to help integrate the left side and the right side of the brain. Now, brain gym, having kids do a few exercises before they sit down and do seat work, fantastic. But I'm not sure it's helping them read better because it's integrating the parts of the brain. And so there's no evidence of that. It may just be a movement activity, and that's fine. Learning styles. This one's still out there big and strong. Learning styles. There is no evidence that students learn better if they are taught to a certain learning style. So you're a visual learner. You learn better if you see in pictures. You're an auditory learner. You learn better if it's auditory. Different kinds of information are learned better in different ways. And I think all of you have learned about UDL, where we need to have multiple means of representation, multiple means of expression, right? Multiple means of engagement. So there's no evidence to support that I'm a visual learner. I am going to gain more knowledge if I get the majority of my instruction through visual means. Doesn't mean that we never use pictures. No. And in fact, for kids with autism, having visual schedules are great. But it's not the learning style. We go more with UDL, not learning styles. Here's some others. Deep pressure therapy. There are occupational therapists, not all, but there's some out there too, that talk about the stroking the skin, the sense is called sensory integration. So there's a lot of things out there that you could go on the internet and look up any of these, and you will find somebody advocating for it. But then we need to look at the source. Where's the evidence? Where's the preponderance of the evidence? Here's another one. Pinterest and teachers pay teachers. You know what? These two sources are absolutely wonderful for finding materials to support instruction, for finding some worksheets, for finding foldables, for finding the materials. But it should not be used to select your intervention. Like, for example, both of these say intervention. I got this one from Pinterest and this one from Teachers Pay Teachers. They say intervention, intervention. So just because these say intervention does not mean that every one of these methods have research to support them. You want to find out the method you want to use and then go find some materials that will support that. But this says literacy intervention. Don't assume that this is a research, these are research-based practices. It looks like there's tons of worksheets and stuff in here. Same thing here. This is a bunch of manipulatives, cool. But is it an intervention curriculum or are they materials? Does that make sense? Yeah. So nothing wrong with Pinterest and teacher pay teachers, but if you're looking for an evidence-based practice, no. So if you looked up evidence-based practices, they're going to tell you to go to these various places. Pros and cons with various places. What Works Clearinghouse is, again, assumed to be the gold standard. So What Works Clearinghouse goes in and they do those meta-analyses and they evaluate the studies, they evaluate the quality of the studies, and they determine whether there's enough evidence to say this practice is evidence-based. One of the hard things about this one, though, I think it's really hard because it focuses more on programs. So some of those printed programs, it will look at things like Success for All. It will look at, some of those big programs. So it is a great site if you are a researcher and want to look at how much research has been done on something. But you know what? It's not that helpful for implementation. So if you look up evidence-based practices, you'll get What Works Clearinghouse all the time. But it doesn't give you a lot of information about what you can do in your classroom. This one is just for students with ASD. And these two people, they are the same ones that I gave you those practice guides in math. And those practice guides in math are actually pretty usable. This one actually has resources, checklists, some modules, but it doesn't go in and evaluate each and every different study. They're doing more of an overall, like we had for the math. So I actually think the practice guides we had for math, they're usable. The National Autism Center looks only for, are these practices effective for those with autism? And I like this one because I work in secondary, the transition class. I love this one because it says, what are the research-based practices for transition? They will do, some practices are only supported by a single study, so maybe it doesn't meet gold standard, but they still, sometimes they will tell you promising practices, so they don't always do only the gold standard. But I think this is accessible. Here are some other ones that I think are good. This Cedar Center is really good. Evidence-Based Intervention Network, the Iris Center, we love the Iris Center. WWC, that What Works Clearinghouse, also has some practice guides that aren't as difficult. So anyway, you do have this in resources. So this is what this one looks like. When I click on it, it's going to take me out, isn't it? We can look at it for 2 seconds. So the reason I want to tell you not to rely on this too much is last year, because What Works Clearinghouse, they always tout it for, having evidence-based practices. Sometimes it's very hard. These intervention reports and reviews of individual studies, that's kind of tiny, isn't it? I need to make this a little bit bigger. There we go. They're just research reviews of the studies and reports. Even, now let's hope it doesn't go out here. Come on. Is it letting me go? There we go. So look at this. It just tells you, it leads you into some practice guides, which are just like the ones I gave you for math. So then it's going to be this whole guide. But say you wanted one for secondary reading. Let's look. That one's reading 4 to 9. Let's see if we can find one for secondary reading. I might scroll down. Oh, this is just algebra specific. See, that's early again. Fractions. So this one has, it's a guide that gives you recommendations. So these practice guides aren't horrible. Here we go, improving adolescent literacy. So these aren't horrible. These aren't bad. That's, if I were to use What Works Clearinghouse, this is where I would go. I don't know that I would go and look at all these data reports. I would look here. Okay, I'm going to stay right there for 1 minute because do you see the best evidence encyclopedia now? Yay! Okay, same thing here. It is going to, so you can, at least it has a little better organization here. Let's say we wanted to do reading, secondary. It is going to give you a guide. It's going to give you one of those guides. And then you can at least find a technical report, a guide. I'm going to stop share, start share. This one is one I haven't seen presented in a lot of our special ed classes before. This is more, it does a lot of these social emotional learning. These are ones I see talked about more in general ed, sometimes counselors and that, but these blueprints, so there's like teen pregnancy programs, substance abuse programs. This is not a bad site at all. It gives the names of the programs and who they are for. So then again, you'll get a guide and it'll go tell you about that. So that's not bad. Like there's one here, this life skills program that's really good. And it's basically a curriculum or a set of practices for teaching like decision making and some of those things. Okay, so this is, yes, the Iris Center. If you want to find any of your, find out if something has evidence behind it, the Iris Center tells you. You guys probably have done so many Iris modules that you are so familiar with this. It should be one of your go-to sites. You know, you probably have it bookmarked, I hope. If you are still wondering about which research-based practice to do your paper on, Iris Center first. How many of you have decided what practice you're going to do your paper on? Let me see with a, give me a thumbs up with an emoji, you know, those little, your little emojis down there. You know where those are down in the, there we go. Oh, Jody is telling me maybe with her face going, oh no, Colin too, the, oh. Who else? I haven't seen emojis from some of the others. Oh, okay, so we are at that stage. Good, we're gonna have a work session tonight. Okay, here we go. Here's some other evidence, but here's some sources. I like this, 5 sources of evidence-based research. This one, if you're doing social emotional learning. Because this has to be in the content areas, you may not be doing that for your paper, but that may be something that you might use for your classroom or for school or your 5-lesson sequence or something like that. Okay. A research-based practice is only as good as its implementation. Okay, so you can look up these articles, you can look all this up, but if you only implement part of it, part of the intervention, then it's no longer a research-based intervention. Okay. So that's why in your paper, you need to list the steps. And one of the things you need to do in your paper is create an intervention checklist. Some of you did this on, the tic-tac-toe that we did. So yes, you are ahead of the game. You understand it. You get it. You know a model of it. All I'm going to do is show you some. Okay. So you have to implement the practice as it was intended, or it's no longer a research-based practice. So what is needed to implement? This is some of the things you're doing in your paper. What kind of materials do you need? Do you have a list of all the steps? And if you're implementing it, practice first, okay? And just know what worked and what didn't. Another thing to know is in your research articles, look and see how much time did it take? Like in your articles, if it says that, oh, these students, after 16 weeks of implementation 3 times a week, they saw results. Don't expect it to work in 3 weeks, 2 times a week, once you implement it. And if you stop at that point, then it's not a research-based practice. You didn't implement it to the full extent. This is like, they actually call it dosage. And when you think about like an implementation or an intervention or something, it's kind of like if you take your antibiotics, but you don't finish. You know how they always tell you, like if you get your antibiotics and it's supposed to be like a full 7 days, but you start feeling better after day 2, so you stop taking it. You need to take the full dose. And teachers commonly, you start out with all the components, and then after a couple of weeks, you start drifting. So that's why these checklists are helpful. Here's an example of one. Okay. Turned on the audio recorder. Explicitly stated a student-friendly goal. The teacher read all the words, established the categories, used sentence frames, modeled, da-da-da-da-da. That's just one. I just gave you examples here. This one, you can use the QR code, and when you go to that, it gives you the checklist. The reason I did that is it comes up too little. When I copied and pasted, you wouldn't have seen it anyway. So I did a QR code instead. This one is PALS. So here's a really good, PALS have these specific steps. Another one. This is just, if this was about partner talking. Here's a peer evaluation. Participated in group discussions, help the group stay on task. So this is like, say you're having the kids work in groups. This might be a checklist for the group. This is a checklist maker. Oh, here was another one. This was an SDI observation tool. I like this one. This would be something that you could see going through to determine if the special education teacher is actually implementing specially designed instruction in the classroom. I think, oh, adaptation. So you can adapt the practice. Like if you wanted to make the visual aids or the scenarios more culturally relevant, that would be okay. You might modify some of the vocabulary in your strategy. You might make the activities itself more engaging while keeping the content. But if you're reducing the length, the number, the frequency, like if you're modifying rather than doing some adaptations, then it's no longer the research-based practice. So guess what? Now is the time. Here we go. Work time. Okay, everybody get a piece of paper. This is going to form the outline. If you want to do it on the computer, you can too. If you want to type rather than a paper, that's fine. You know, you might want to, some of you may feel more comfortable typing than writing. Sometimes I like to type rather than write because if I write it down and then type it, sometimes I feel like, that was an extra step. Okay. So, quick write, 5 minutes. Why is it important to use research-based practices? This is the introduction to your paper. You are going to start your paper right now, tonight, in class. Yay! Let's use class time to work on your assignments, right? Yay! Okay, I'm going to set a timer for 5 minutes. You can do stream of consciousness. You can look back. Oh, do you want me to put the link to the PowerPoint in the chat? Or do you want me to go back to that one page? Let me go back to that page. Okay, I'm going to set 5 minutes. You're going to tell me, you're just going to write for yourself. Telling me, you're going to tell your paper that I will read eventually. Why is it important to use research-based practices? Boom, boom. La, la, la. I think it was like the first. Ta-da! Okay. If you want to turn off your mic or your camera or whatever, you can. I'm just putting on a timer for 5 minutes and let's get that first section of your paper done. Okay? 5 minutes. Quick write. 1, 2, 3, go. I am also going to put a link to the PowerPoint in our chat. And you are seeing the importance of using the research-based practices, right? It's still on the screen. Yeah, perfect. Okay, good. Want to make sure. Because as you know, sometimes what I see on my end is not what you're seeing on your end. Okay, my watch says it's 5 minutes. Do we need a couple more minutes? If you do, give me a thumbs up. Or in the chat. Okay, thanks, Amanda. We'll go a couple more minutes. I know you're preparing an outline right now. I'm going to give you another hint. In the articles you find in their rationale, they are probably going to talk about why it's so important to use research-based practices too. So you're going to find some evidence for that. Some of the articles in Laulima I've pointed out that this might be a good article to talk about either the difficulties that students may have, or it might talk about the importance of using research-based strategies. So that's where you can actually find a couple of citations to support what you're writing right now. Okay, go ahead and wrap up your sentence that you're writing, the outline you're writing, whatever it is you're currently writing. And come back for our second part. Well, step 2. Actually, I have a couple more. Okay, here's a hard part. Which research-based practice have you selected? This is where I need to get out a notebook to see where we are. Has anybody selected? If you have, let me know. If you've selected which one.
I'd like to do cooperative learning, but I'm still making up my mind.
Okay. Cooperative learning, if you do, you need to say a specific cooperative learning for what content. I would recommend either, so the one article I was just trying to, I was looking at one article that I had right in front of me. For math, I would recommend either CRA or what was it? Cognitive strategy instruction. Is anybody going to do math or the schema-based instruction? That was the other good one. So either a cognitive strategy instruction, schema-based instruction, or CRA.
So I was thinking of schema for math. Schema
Okay. Schema is about story problems. What grade do you have, Jody?
4th and 5th.
Okay. You need to really look at that because you're going to have to remember that you want to at least try this out once. So schema-based instruction. Anybody else going to do schema-based instruction? What about CRA? For a lot of you elementary, because you teach math, I would choose a math strategy. So for a lot of you elementary, I would choose math.
I was thinking about using the peer assisted learning for math
For what content?
for pre-algebra.
Okay. So PALS math.
Yes,
Okay. PALS math, most of the research on that is younger because when you look at PALS has kind of a lot of reading. But you can look it up. Look it up and see if you can find articles first. And if you can't, because I know there's a lot of stuff, PALS math, a lot of stuff on younger. Not sure you're going to find articles on algebra in that one, but look and see.
Okay.
Okay.
If I can't, then maybe I should look at one of the other, like the cognitive strategy, right?
Yeah, or yeah, like CRA. Cognitive strategy instruction would be something like solve it, where it has the steps, like something like read for understanding, paraphrase, visualize, hypothesize, estimate, compute, and check.
That might fit better now that I think about it.
Okay, so you might want to use cognitive strategy instruction. That might be better. Montague is big. Write that name down. That's where you're going to find a lot. That's where you're going to find cognitive strategy instruction in math.
Okay.
Those of you elementary, I think CRA might not be bad. So Jody, the schema-based, it's using cues in word problems to determine the type of the problem, create a visual model, and then how to choose the appropriate procedure to solve the problem. Okay. Who else? Other ideas?
I was thinking about doing word study for social studies for 7th and 8th graders.
Oh, okay. So for social studies. Okay. I just ended up buying that book, Word Study for Secondary. See if there's some good pages, like scan and send you or something. Okay, so secondary social studies. Okay, what else? I'm not quite there yet, because this is what I was going to do. Let me look at the next phase. If you don't have your RBP yet, I don't think you're ready to list the steps. But I was going to have everybody, if you have your RBP, find, or at least start to find, we're going to take time to find 3 studies. And I wanted to do that while we were in class in case anybody needed help. You know how to do the library search, or if you need help with the library search, or if you need help with APA style. Are all of you confident that you can find articles? Yeah. You know what? Just for the heck of it. I want to just model finding some studies on one of these topics. Is there one of these that we want to look up? Do we want to do, I think either maybe cognitive strategy instruction or schema based. Should we do that, or CRA? I promise you, we're only at 5:39. We will definitely be out of here by 6, but I just want to model one. Okay, good.
Schema.
I want to see if there's schema-based instruction with students as young as yours anyway. Okay. I have seen it like a little bit older. So there are different ways I'm here at the library page, Manoa, Hawaii EDU library. I could go here, database, and I could go straight to Google Scholar. I'll do one on Google Scholar and then I'll go back and show you the way I usually do it, okay? But we'll do one with Google Scholar first. Okay, I am at Google Scholar. Schema-based instruction for math. Let's try that. Schema-based instruction in math. Okay, schema-based instruction. Jitendra is like the originator. Okay. Now, this one actually is going to be really good because it's an evidence-based review. Sarah, yay. What I'm hoping what it's going to do is give you some studies. So this is where they did a study of the studies. So they're going to, this is where they evaluate it. I'm not as worried about that. What I'm really worried about is, here we go. This is what we want to look at. Oh, good. 3rd and 4th grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade. So Jody, you are going to look at the reference list for this study. For this study. For this study. Okay. So you go to this reference list and get those studies. Let's see, what was this one? Okay, so you can get those studies and you will have 3 studies. The other thing that you have is right here. Look at this, a randomized controlled trial. That means this study is going to be of high quality. Now, this one may, let me make this bigger again, guys. This one may be just an article about it, which is not bad because this may tell you the steps. So even if they, so this one is just telling about the approach. Okay. So this one is not going to give you a study per se, but in your intro, it's going to give you some information here. Okay. It's going to tell you about, because these are the change, the group, and compare. You teach the kids the difference between those three types of problems. Okay. This is going to tell you this schema-based instruction is described here. So here is a really good description. Look at this. So they have step 1. Here's a 4-step strategy. It's going to tell you step 1. And then the next paragraph starts with for step 2. Okay. Okay, good. I am confident that you can do that then because we found several that were young enough. Yay. Anybody else convinced they want to do schema-based instruction now for not going to do that. Okay, so that was good. Google Scholar came up with really good, and you notice Asha Jitendra, that is her baby, and she has done so much research on it and just amazing. So this one is an evidence-based practice. It has multiple studies that have shown multiple effects, even with different grade levels. Okay, great. Let's, for the heck of it, let's do CRA. While we're still here, oops. Let's see what we have here. Okay, Witzel, this guy Witzel is the biggie for CRA. Okay, so Danielle, Kayala, Witzel, actually Witzel is more the higher level though. Now that I think about it, Witzel has done a lot of these like secondary students. Which Danielle, you've got young ones. Kayali, your kids are pretty young too, yeah? Let me see what you got there, Kayala. Okay, now let's see if it gives you. Are you seeing the article that Kayala gave me? Or are you still on the? Okay. Now, what we want to do is find some studies. So this is really good. Okay, Witzel, 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 Witzel. Okay. Okay, there's a journal article. You're going to probably have a lot on CRA. Okay, algebra, elementary there. Wait a minute. Oh, here's perimeter and geometry. Oh, here's a synthesis. And this person, Bauk, she looks at students with more significant disabilities, but this one she does learning disabilities, so that's not bad. Looks like we have a lot on this one. Oh, there it is, algebra, Witzel. He's always does the older. And there is CRA. You are CRA. Yeah, that one, Kayala, gives you the steps really well. And it lists the studies, but from there, you're going to have to go get the studies, but it does help. That article was good. I want to go back and use a different way. Google Scholar is good, but I want to show you one other way. Bum, 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 bum. There we are, library again. This is one thing I like to do. I go to academic search complete. I like that one. Academic search complete. And then once I get here, I choose even more databases. Okay, so I'm going to go to choose these databases. Eric, I like, that's educational resources. I also really like this psychology and behavioral sciences. And this professional development is one that is really good for teachers as well. I could do some more depending on the topic. Sometimes I will do Medline, but this one really isn't about characteristics. This is more about strategies. So I'm going to go with those. So I've got 4 databases going on now. And let's see, we wanted to do the cognitive strategy instruction. Oh my gosh, and mathematical problem solving, it popped right up for us. And I have a feeling, is it going to be? Yes, it is. It's Montague. Montague is the big one on this one. Another thing I could do, I could put in the name. And once you come up with Montague, look, there's more, there's a few more articles. This is not, I think this would be good. Okay, let's see, Susan. So middle school. Medical. Oh, this was the one that was in that article, the Solve It. Adolescents. Middle school. So you've got the name here. This always helps once you get like the name. We're going to do one last one and then we're going to go. Word study. Word study and social studies. This isn't doing it. Oh, here we go. This is perfect, Rochelle. So morphology is what word study does. So this one's really good. That one's really good. Oh, this one might be good too, because look, it has word study. No, that's preschool. No. That's still preschool. Academic vocabulary. You'll have to see what they're talking about here in vocabulary. The other thing that I'm going to do, Rochelle, is I'm going to do morphemes. Oh, no. Oops. Oh, be quiet. Morphemes or morpheme acquisition. Let's see what we have going here. Okay, I'm going to do morphology instead. Morphology instruction. Oh, here we go. Oh, this is good. Yeah. Yeah. Well. Stop share. Hopefully everyone has hopefully you have an idea. So where you are right now, let's just recap and then let you go. Right now, you have your math quiz due on Sunday. At that point, you should be working on your co-taught lesson and starting this paper. Next week, when we get together, I'm going to share a little bit about science. And what we're going to do is talk about open, guided, and structured inquiry. Because in science, you will see so much about inquiry-based learning, problem-based learning. And there are different levels of support for that. So we just want to talk about that. But I think we are, like I said, we are in the last stages. So do your math quiz and co-teaching lesson and start on your paper. Does everybody, you have an idea of what you need to do to get started on the paper, right? Good. Okay. Excellent. If there are any questions, you can stay and ask. I am going to stop recording.